Right, before all that, this is the new bombshell book that's been dominating the headlines. Endgame is the controversial inside story of royal rivalries, which dishes out fresh allegations and some familiar ones too about the royal family and their relationships with the Sussexes. And we're joined now by the book's author, Omid Scobie. Good morning,
Morning.
Omid.
Hi.
Thank you
Morning,
for
Omid.
coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Look, we're 2 days into the book being out now, two or 3 days. The reaction has been, well, kind of fierce, hasn't it? The public are unhappy.
Yeah.
The press have been hard. And some of the reviews haven't been great. I'm just wondering how your week's been so far.
So, thank you for asking. I knew this book would be controversial. It obviously goes into areas that I think that often royal correspondents shy away from, whether it's conversations around race or, of course, the relationship between the press and the palace, but really going into the details of that. And I never expected it to sort of be presented fairly on the pages of the same papers that their secrets are now being revealed for the first time. And, of course, none of that has made any of the coverage. I think what's been frustrating is seeing so much written about the book that just wasn't true. There were stories about things that I'd supposedly said about the Princess of Wales, Kate, for example, that she only smiles or grins in front of the cameras or something. There's not a word in the book that reflects that whatsoever, and neither have I ever said it in an interview. But you sort of have to sit back and watch these things play out. And then
you did refer to her as a Stepford wife, though, which is kind of offensive too, isn't it, Omid?
It said Stepford wife-like, and, you know, I think that the whole section of the book, if you read it in detail, talks about, A, that she's never put a step wrong, but also that the role does require that kind of stately detachment, and it compares her to the Queen in a very favourable way, actually. But, of course, if you compare that to, say, everyday folk, there is a sort of, like, very reserved, almost Stepford-like approach to the, position.
It is a kind of a hard thing to say or to hear about yourself, and you can understand why there's been a lot of negative reaction. Before we get into the meat and veg of the book, though, if you don't mind, a lot of it feels like a bit of a hatchet job against the royal family, OK? And, you know, Harry and Meghan, they kind of are largely untouched from negativity from your pen in this. So, you know, a lot of the speculation is that you are a mouthpiece for Harry and Meghan. So what is your relationship with Harry and Meghan at the moment?
I'm not their friend. I've never sat down with Meghan privately for interviews. I've never exchanged information with Meghan. I'm not in their private world in any way whatsoever.
Are you fighting their corner?
No.
It feels like
I have been, during Meghan's time as a working member of the royal family, I was extremely sympathetic for the position she was in. I was one of a number of journalists that are part of that small pack that covered the story as a full-time job. For me, there were things that I saw being written about in the press, comments that were being made about her, unfair treatment when it came to how she was being written about compared to, say, how we've written about others in the past. And so I called it out. You know, I work in the American press. I'm not restricted by some of the limitations of being a member of the British press and that relationship with the royal family. So I did go on television and talk about the racism that she faced. And rather than anyone wanting to talk about it or listen about it, I was called her fan, mouthpiece, cheerleader, etc. So I can't run away from that narrative. It's stuck. You know as well as I do that tabloid nicknames stick forever. But Harry and Meghan...
See, this is where I have a bit of a... I don't mean to cut across you.
Yeah, go for it.
I find a lot of this content quite tabloidy too.
Yeah.
So, you know, you got to bear the brunt of that as well.
It delves into...
As part of the American press crew, you don't have a role within the reporting pack over here with the royal family. We know Meghan was in touch with the first book and sent some advice your way.
Well, she wasn't in touch with the first book.
Via an aide.
She spoke to her communications officer, and I discovered that at the same time as the rest of the world
So it happened.
But
so it happened.
It's the job of a communications officer at the palace to deal with the press.
But if you're not dealing with them, it would be very surprising that any of her staff or aides would talk to you. So people are questioning your sources.
Can I ask you a question? Have you ever had this conversation with people that write source quotes about Camilla, Charles, William,
100%.
Kate? Do they ever get called friends of, mouthpieces of, cheerleaders? Yes. Or is it simply because people don't like the narratives that I purport in my reporting because it makes people feel uncomfortable? And rather than us engage in healthy conversation and discourse about it, it's easier to sling a nickname at me or accuse me of something that is, quite frankly, not true, but also unfair. I'm open to criticism and healthy conversation, but I also don't appreciate and have never appreciated the nonsense that is written about me and my work.
Omid, do you kind of feel that some people are trying to maybe discredit you, discredit the Sussexes, to kind of avoid discussing whether or not the royal family's racist? Would you say that's happening?
Firstly, I've never used the racist word when in this subject. Even the book makes it very clear that we're talking about unconscious bias here. And I realise that the alliteration of racist royal is a great headline, but that's not the subject at stake here. We're talking about a conversation that was raised about the colour of Archie's skin that they called concerns. And for me, it was important to get to the bottom of that. A, why was it not covered ever again? Why did the Sussexes never talk about it? What happened behind the scenes? The palace said it was being dealt with privately. Was it? And listen, this isn't just a family that we're writing about like celebrities. This is a family that is part of a publicly funded institution that is representative of Britain for our entire diverse country. And so to ask questions about was the issue of race or potential unconscious bias dealt with properly is important for us to learn about, because it says a lot about their attitudes towards the subject on a much wider level.
I do agree. It's a conversation that we should be having. I mean, it really is. I guess it's the manner, the way things have played out since the book has come out. Primarily a name being named in the Dutch version of your book.
Well, two names.
That just seems bizarre to everybody out there, because you don't accidentally put in a name, and you can't put it down to mistranslation, can you? It does feel like a stunt to sell books, which I understand.
I wish it was the case.
Okay, how did that happen?
It's still being investigated right now.
What do you think happened?
I wrote and edited the English version of the book with one publisher. That then gets licensed to other publishers. I obviously can't speak Italian, German, French, Dutch, or any of the other languages that come out. So the only time you hear about the book is once it's come out in the public domain. I'm as frustrated as everyone else. I make it very clear in this book that I, in every way possible, want to adhere to the laws surrounding this subject. It's why I've been very careful in how it's described in the book, and it's why I've never spoken about it beyond what I've said in the public domain before. The reality is, though, is that this is information that is not privy just to me. Journalists across Fleet Street have known those names for a long time. We've all followed a certain code of conduct when it comes to talking about it. It's frustrating that now what's going on in the Netherlands with the book that was obviously immediately rescinded and is now being reprinted has happened, and I'm glad to hear so. But for me, I can only talk about the English version of the book that I wrote and produced.
But are you upset by it, though? Are you upset by it that those names came out when it had nothing, you didn't want that to happen?
I had never submitted a book that had their names in it, so I can only talk about my version. I'm obviously frustrated. I wouldn't say I'm upset about it, because, to be honest, I've been operating in a bubble of no emotion for the last 10 days. But I am frustrated about it, just like I am many of the other things that I've seen written or said about the book.
Omid, you're a journalist.
I am a journalist.
And you know the effect a book like this has, so surely you can't be surprised by the reaction.
I knew that it would be heated and controversial, absolutely. But I think that, I don't know how closely you follow it, but a lot of this has been simply about me. It's been unnecessary information about me. It's been unfair attacks about me. It's been an assassination of my character. My father's been harassed.
You had death threats as well.
And I don't want to make light of those, but death threats are almost like the least of my worry. I had tabloid journalists harassing my father last week and the week before, trying to purport all sorts of nonsense. I've had things done that have happened behind the scenes that no one would ever know about. The reality is that this book covers a lot of things that the British press don't want to talk about because they are part of it. And it's why it's so important for... Listen, I'm not asking people to buy this book, rent it from the library, but I want people to see it for themselves, because this is a very different manuscript to the book being described in the pages of the press. I don't know if you... Have you guys
already, Omid, though?
Have you guys read it?
I haven't read it.
I've been through an awful lot of it, OK?
Through the book or through the pages of the press?
Through the pages of the book. Through the pages of the book. Some of the reviews, and actually it's interesting. I've read all the papers, OK? Left, right, down the middle, the whole lot, New York Times. And there is a general feel that a lot of the information was out there already, and you've put your spin on it. And I guess one of the questions people are asking, why? What's your end game?
No, for me, I feel that we've reached a pinnacle moment with the royal family where we are having conversations about the purpose, relevancy and future of the royal family. When we celebrated the life of the Queen, we also celebrated the fact that she upheld a certain set of morals, values, ethics and principles in that role. She was always above the fray. So for me to ask the question, do the current working royals all still uphold those same morals, values and ethics, not just in front of the cameras, but behind palace walls, I think is a legitimate question to ask. I want to live in a world and report in a world where we can scrutinise the royal family in the same way we do politicians. These are not celebrities just there to be written about in a fun way. Of course, there is a light and fluffy side of that story, but this is also an establishment at the heart of our country. And so to have more serious conversations about them, which I do in the book, I feel is absolutely important.
Do you believe in the monarchy?
I do, actually.
Do you want the monarchy to exist?
If you had read the book, you'll see that there are many
I look forward to it.
Many aspects of the monarchy I appreciate and have been proud of, but there are also many moments I feel that don't represent the Britain that we should be in today.
When you say things like splintered and fighting for survival, an unstable family business, a created firm, I'm just wondering, are you saying that from an empathetic viewpoint, from a viewpoint that you wanted to survive, you wanted to be fixed? Is that the conversation you wanted to have? Because that's a very interesting conversation and a valid one, to be fair.
I'm saying we've reached a moment where we're at a sort of split in the road, where if you look at European monarchies, past and present, some have gone on to great glory. Many, most, have gone on to fade into insignificance or become tourist attractions because they've lost touch with the nation. I don't want to see that happen with our royal family, but I also think that if we keep pretending that we're only just covering the fun stuff, or we go by what's purported in a lot of the papers, I don't think we're ever really getting to the nitty-gritty parts of the conversation. I've tried to handle them in a very respectful, mature way in the book. And I do obviously lean on a lot of stuff that has existed in the tabloid press over here to have those conversations.
Sure. Omid, why do you think Harry and Meghan have had unfair press?
It's not about Harry and Meghan having unfair press. I think, for me, the interest... And listen, firstly, I want to say Harry and Meghan don't appear in this book until page 146. I say very early on, they are irrelevant to the future of the royal family. I'm only here to talk about the past experiences and stories and how they relate to the issues that we're talking about with the royal family today. So I have very little interest in what they're doing in California, etc. But I do think when Meghan was a working member of the royal family, she was massively misrepresented in a lot of the coverage. I think a lot of it was steeped in xenophobia, misogyny and prejudice. And I've always said that very loudly from the start. And it's the thing that has made me a target for many people in terms of someone who is just seen as like some mouthy fan of her, rather than perhaps, OK, I'm a mixed-race member of the press pack and I've got something different to say about it.
Do you know, that's such an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
And I would have loved to have seen a book that spoke about that and looked to the future of the monarchy.
20,000 words on race and the royals.
Yeah.
It's the deepest dive on the subject I think any royal correspondent has ever done. And not one article that is out there today has written a word about that section.
Would you have written it differently now if you did it today?
No, because I wrote it without fear or favour to anyone.
Piers Morgan was saying that he had no conversations with Camilla. He's called you an outright liar. What would you say to him?
I don't know what he says. I only go by the reporting that I have. I also, as I was researching this, and as you see cited in the references at the back, he's spoken a lot about his friendship with Camilla, the Queen. So, listen, I don't know what to make of that, but I only go by the information that I have. He's also said a lot of things about me and the story and so on that is also not true. So I don't find that particularly credible.
He's also said stuff about Meghan in the past as well. So, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know,
he also wrote an op-ed this week saying that they should be burned alive or something like that. Yeah. So
none of that, but none of that's acceptable. That's the thing. None of it's acceptable. Omid, just a quick word to the public. It's their monarchy.
Yeah.
It's their king. What would you say to them in their anger this morning with your book out there? What would you say?
I would say that this book is written to sit at the heart of the conversation about the purpose, relevancy and future of the royal family. And whether some of the subjects in the book make people uncomfortable or not, they are still conversations we should be had. You can leave that book feeling stronger about the monarchy than ever before, or you can leave that book feeling like, actually, there are some more things that I'd like public discourse about.
Well, I do hope it starts discussions that have to be had.
I think it needs to.
Yeah.
I think, Endgame, Inside the Royal Family and the Monarchy's Fight for Survival by Omid Scobie. Thank you for joining us.
And also, Omid, look, you know, I hope there's no more attacks on you. You know, it's a book. That's all you've done. I hope that all that stuff stops, because that's not right for anyone, OK?
Thank you
so
for
you
saying
can
that.
take care of yourself, all right?
Thanks.
Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it.